Hi everybody, here today with Mr. Ben. We're going to be talking about Model V and lots of interesting things regarding that. So you want to pick up on the P.L.E.S.P planes that we were talking about, and I was like, Ben, shouldn't we be recording this? So here we are.
Yep. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So some of you out there may have heard of Victor Glanka, and he had the P.I.P.S planes, and so that was physiological, intellectual, psychological, and social, and these are planes on which the functions can be described. And they're in his book, actually in this book of his. And my favorite page of this book is the copyright page. And if you buy the book and look at it, you'll see why. That's my favorite page. And but the issue I have with those planes, though, is that he has an intellectual level for all functions, even when it's not a thinking function. And I think that if you're describing a non-thinking function on an intellectual plane, you're combining that function with the thinking level. It's almost like, as Van der Hoek would say, you're moving from one sphere into another. So I can give an example of this. When somebody is reading or they recognize something, you are going from the sphere of the senses to the sphere of thinking. Because it's like you just got the raw sensory data, and then you know what it is, what kind it is, and all these other things and associations. It's like the material of thought, and so perception is, say, one of those things, one of those processes that uses sensory material, but it's within the realm of thought. It's just like, just even right now, listening to these words, understanding these words, it's more than just sensing going on. So I thought I'd remove the intellectual plane. So I like the physiological, I liked the psychological, and I like the social. So the physiological things, like I was just saying that with many people with ENFP preferences, you can see when they're using NE, and it's like the ideas occurring on their face, and you can see it going on.
Hold on, I have to ask, because like NE, for example, that's a lot, like idea, that's so much mental processes going on. Now, what about something like SE, where it's so much in the physical that you really don't even have to, I mean, other than just automatic processes to maneuver your environment, you really don't have to be doing much mentally for SE.
Yeah, but this is more in terms of the physical manifestation of somebody being in that function. So if you're seeing somebody in sport and they're completely clued into their environment, and it's like, you can say they are in a state of extroverting instincting. They are like reacting in the moment, situational awareness. All of their attention is directed outwards and responding quicker than you can think. Like split-second decisions, like in baseball, you got like a third of a second to hit that ball, make little adjustments, and that lot. Those kind of instinctive reactions, sort of going with the flow, or if someone's in a fight, literally split seconds to make multiple decisions, and it's like it's like they're not even really decisions in the sphere of like thought. It's like that's where it gets more instinctive, because there's no time to think.
Right.
Really.
Absolutely. But do you think it would be fair to say that some extroverted functions are more mentally, like use more mental capacity? Like, for example,
I think NE does.
Like NE versus SE.
Yeah, because I think that I would say
even like TE. I mean, you're like, you know, thinking about the steps, the processes.
Yeah. So it's like when it's, again, because you're in the realm of thought,
right?
And even with intuition, I think frequently what you get is that thing, that inspiration pops into your mind. Then it's like, and then you make these connections, and like it's like what's unconscious, and then as soon as it becomes conscious, you then think it through to see if it works. So then you can say that's one of those examples of something moving from one sphere into another, where you have that moment of inspiration, It's like it's popped up from the unconscious into consciousness, and then you think about it. So that's moved from one state to another. And what you can also have, something that George Binney Dibley mentioned, and he talked about two kinds of intuition that the French mentioned, because he was talking about different kinds of instinct and intuition, and he talked, and it's something like intuition réfléchie or something. But basically what that means is reflection-based re-intuition, where it's like you might have an inspiration, think about something, and then as you're thinking about it, go, aha! So it's like it's come from the thought because you thought about it, and you probably do. So for NTs, especially INTs, it's going to be a lot of have the intuition, think about it, and then have an intuition based on what you've thought about again and again and again and again. And so you get this combination and loop of intuiting and thinking going on. But getting back to the physiological, so we can see certain things when people are NE-DOMs, at least the creative NE-DOMs, and they're ideating all over the place. And you can just see ideas occurring to them. And there's certain stuff, and even with NI, I would say, like, if you've got that INTJs frequently, like, they'll zone out, especially if they're like extreme INTJs, they'll like zone out. It's like they'll ask them to think about something, and it's like they just stop.
Right. My family would make fun of me for this when I was younger.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, everyone would stop talking and stare at me, and then finally I'd come around and everyone would be staring at me and they'd start laughing.
Right, so there's an example. That is like a bona fide physiological correlate of the function.
Right.
And I don't really know for TI and FI. I mean, Vaultology, it thinks it has like little things, like if someone does a certain gesture, like exacting hands or things like that. I mean, there's a book on this, but it's a little bit wishy-washy. I got annoyed.
It's a little bit ridiculously specific.
Yeah, like this book, I got annoyed by this book because he said that Kersey was a behaviorist. I got very annoyed because Kersey is all about flipping motivation, because I mean, I can prove it, because Linda Bowman's basically repackages Kersey's work and she renamed temperament essential motivator patterns. So not just action, it's just that Kersey looks at actions, like he'll look at the speech.
Okay, right.
And that brings us into the linguistic part of say, well, if you've got a lot of TI and NE going on at the same time, you might be abstract like this fella here. Or these, so there might be, or what other kinds of things, what is the language like of FE-DOMs? There might be certain language things that are going to correlate, that will be related to the functions, not the functions themselves. I'm not saying the language is the function, but it's related to it.
Right.
I'm just going to put. That was more for the audience.
Sorry.
Not to diss the audience, but Hailey and I have talked about this before. And then, so there's certain linguistic things, like, say, if someone's in a TE state, they might be going towards the evidence and what then can sort of be deduced from that evidence. So you might get a little bit of an overlap between somebody who says just points to it. So an SE Dom might say, oh, well, it's this, and like point out a fact. And that, in that instance, it's like, well, are we talking about TE because someone's going towards the fact? Or is someone going towards, or is it SE because it's what's right in front of them? So then it might be a case of, if it's right there in front of them, then it might say, well, this is, say, an SE Dom that's pointing out the information that's right in front of them. Whereas the TE might then probably develop that a bit more into sort of like what it then means. I've got an example in this book. I actually bought it twice because I had messy notes in it. But there's a funny bit about the pub brawl. Have I mentioned this to you before, Hailey?
I don't think so.
About this book? There's a wonderful bit where...
But I can definitely believe it about the notes.
Notes. Yeah, it got too messy and I was like ashamed of myself, and so I bought the book again.
Okay.
And then so I could do the notes only neater with a friction pen. Nice and neat. So what happened is, where did they do the... they had a pub brawl. Where is it? 8 psychological types. That's it, a pub brawl. Now, I think I have this, but I'll read it out for folks. So, and this will give you an example of like, and basically in this, they're talking about a feeling type, so FE or FI DOM, intuitive type, NE or NI DOM, thinking type, TE or TI DOM, sensing type, SE or SI DOM. That's how they sort of frame it. And so a pub brawl. An example will help to clarify what Jung meant by these different functions and attitudes. Let us imagine that 4 people, a sensation type, a thinking type, a feeling type, and an intuiting type. I changed it from intuitive to intuitive. I'll be honest about that. Witness the following scene. 2 men come staggering out of a bar. They're shouting and swearing at one another. There is a struggle. One of them falls to the ground and bangs his head on the pavement. So that's a sidewalk. Each witness will respond to these events in a manner typical of his type. We will take each of them in turn. The sensation type will give the clearest account of what's happened. He will have noted the height, build, and general appearance of the 2 men. One was fat, middle-aged, and bald, and had a scar over his left eye. The other, younger, fair-haired, more athletic, and had a mustache. Both were dressed casually in t-shirts, jeans, and trainers. It was the fat one who fell, and it was his right temple that struck the curb. There was a crack on impact, etc. Now, the difference comes in the thinking type, in the way they sort of make deductions and rather inductions from that, but they're not wild inductions. They're sort of like commonsensical thinking based on what they've just seen. So here we go. The thinking type interprets the events as they happen, working out what it all means. The 2 men come staggering out of the bar, so evidently they have been drinking. So do you see what I mean? It's like there's no direct physical proof of that, but it's like, I would say that gets into the realm of extroverted thinking and goes beyond what they merely see. They are shouting and swearing at one another, so they are having a disagreement. So it's like always when these so's come up, a struggle ensues. So they must be feeling strongly enough to become physically violent about it. One falls to the ground. So he must be the weaker or drunker of the 2. The latter cracks his head. So he must be concussed and in need of medical attention. So you see what I mean? It's like you're going in, you're doing a little bit of interpretation of what's going on. Now, the feeling types. Now, when it gets to the intuitive type, it gets quite amusing, in my humble opinion. Okay. So hold on to your hat. The feeling type responds to each event in the scene with value judgments. What a sordid episode! What thoroughly objectionable people! This is clearly a bar frequented by louts, and not a place to go if one wants a quiet chat with a friend. The one on the ground may have hurt himself, but it serves him right. Now, this is the intuitive type, and to me it sounds like a parody of an NFP. Okay. The intuitive type sees the whole story. They are football hooligans who support opposing teams. Disgusted by their bad language, the landlord told them to clear off, and this inflamed them to violence. The man who cracked his head is accident prone, and this is just another incident in a lifetime of misfortune. He has fractured his skull and a clot will form on his brain, requiring surgery. He will be off work for weeks, and his long-suffering wife will once again have to struggle to make ends meet. This is what happens to people from a poor cultural background who have nothing else to live for but football and drink. Things like this will go on happening and get much worse because we do nothing to change society or improve the educational system, etc. So there are...
Yeah, I don't disagree with it.
That's your NF.
Well,
There's not a bit of NF in you, but... Well,
I mean pretty much...
yeah, you are the intuitive type.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. They're only giving the NF type. I mean, if really pressed, like, hey, let's leave this out and see where it goes, like, okay, it probably wouldn't be much further from that. But I mean, I would have seen two drunken idiots just beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but you can see the certain things you can pick up linguistically that sort of correlated to functions. And then we've got the EEG stuff, which is basically all this. And if people want to know more, get Dario's book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. No, that's not right. No, Science of Personality. And then we've got the social stuff. Now, what I've done with the social stuff is I've thought, well, look at the Kersey roles, where the Kersey intelligent roles correlate to function pairs or function triads. So, for example, the Kersey role of the inventor correlates to NE, TI, and TE. I put TE in there because, like, you got some practical thinking involved in inventing.
Right.
And if you're architecting, if you're designing something, then it's like, okay, TI and NE, and it's like, okay, that's where INTP is the best at coming up with theories and structures. We could say that if you are somebody who is thinking about the consequences of actions and doing like a long-term 20 to 30-year plan, like INTJ is best at that. And it's like, okay, which functions does that activity draw on? Well, I would say it draws on the intuition of development, which is a big part of NI, and also practical thinking, which is a big part of TE. So you can say from a Kersey point of view, these intelligent roles correlate to function pairs. So it's like with SFJs, you could say if someone's like in the nursing and it's like, oh, there's a lot of like kindness and warmth coming out, and you can see the SI in terms of that part of SI that has to do with attending to someone's medical health or one's own health, then you can say, oh, okay, that activity, that intelligent role, that part of the logistical intellect, that correlates to the function pairing of FE and SI. So there you can see, without being able to see the functions, we can say, well, they've got this body language, they're using these words, they've got this brain activity.
And it's like a high probability that this person is, understood.
And doing these kinds of activities that it's reasonable to assume that draw on these functions. So it's reasonable to assume that strategic building draws on the NT functions, that tactical manipulating draws on the... actually, that's a little bit tricky. That's about on SE, because SE is about being adaptive. That logistical safekeeping, well, it draws on SI because SI has got an instinct to be conservative and like go towards authority and don't take much risks. And we could say there's certain things with NFs with mentoring. There you go. You've got intuition of development, but it's within the realm of diplomatic enabling. So it's development of people, psychological development. And so it go, okay, that correlates with, and if someone's mentoring, it's like, well, I would say for INFJ, if I was to say which functions are involved in what they do when they actually act as a therapist or a counselor, I would say, okay, so they're trying to get the person to change. And it's like, so it's like intuition of development with NF, intuition of personal development. And I think there's a bit of FE involved in there. There's a bit of FI involved in there. So it's like, and so it would correlate to the three strongest functions. And so now I can go on to, if you click on my little square, you should be able to show the. So this, I think it correlates with these functions in this position. So for INTJ, it would be like arranging contingencies, planning about the future. You're going to pull on NI in thinking, development and thinking. So you use these top three, and this is one of the things I went for in Model V, to make it easier than Model G, is to have the functions basically be ordered in the actual strength of them. So it's fair enough to say, Hailey, NI is your strongest and FE is your weakest. Any objections to those two?
No.
And do you reckon T is probably your second?
Yeah.
And then...
But I'd say quite strong FI.
Yeah.
Though.
Yep. And then also one of the things to look at is that valued and unvalued. And so usually when it's a strong unvalued functions, which I call the unsung allies, they're using it to serve the needs of other functions or a temperament need. So for example, INTJ is very good at finding the errors in other people's reasoning.
Yes,
so
absolutely. And I think it's quite entertaining sometimes if I have time and the person pisses me off. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
So can you give an example? I kind of getting off topic, sorry, how the INTJ doesn't value any?
Well, it's because they value NI.
Well, yes, I know, but I mean more of like a situational example,
okay.
like.
Okay, so.
Like, okay, for example, I feel like I've never been very creative. Everything that I've done is kind of like stealing ideas. I hate to say it, but I mean, I see something, I'm like, I can do it better. I can make that better. Like, I can improve this. I don't know if that plays on the INTJs, like wanting to improve systems, but I feel like that's where I really, really excel. And I don't know if any, just like, I do not feel on my own creative. Like, I'm so good at taking something and improving it. But as far as like building something from the ground up, it's just not my strong point.
It's so there's a good thing that Chris Howard said, is an NLP guy, said, your focus determines your reality. So you're looking to making things better. Whereas the focus of attention of the NE Dom is towards the new and the novel, and maybe creating stuff for creating stuff's sake.
Okay.
Now, although creativity is associated with NE, I do see a creative or imaginative subfunction of every function.
Okay.
Did we talk about the subfunctions in the first event?
We might have.
A little bit. But yes, generally, if an NP is not creative, I'm like, what kind of NP are you? You get a bit bigoted with the functions. It's like, you can take things a little bit too far, and it's like, well, are you supposed to be musical or good at sport or something, SP? Can you act? It's like, and it's like, with NTs, like, you can get bigoted, like, it's like, you're a scientist, oh, you're not much of an NT, are you? That kind of stuff going on. Or call yourself an NF, you're not a therapist. All this sort of, like, you can get down.
That's great.
That's where you get these sort of predispositions. So, an example. So with the focus of attention of the INTJ, so in Model A, they would call that position ignoring. And so they don't consider it. And I've been looking at some things to sort of make cognitive functions more real. I've been looking at its sort of like more respectable big brother or big sister. That's cognitive psychology. Even though functions are a little bit, well, arguably old, but cognitive psychology and like it looking at, and they looked at creative people, and it was like, it's how much you feed the machine in order to find these connections. And it is the case that NPs tend to have more and diverse interests than INTJ. And when you're feeding more in, they're able to see the connections between something. But INTJ typically will have the ability to go deeper because of their focus, and to find something with a practical application. And again, focus of attention, improvement, not reinventing the wheel. And like, so the focus of attention for the NTP. So within the sphere of strategic building, the NTJs are going to look for something that can be developed, can be improved. The NTP might just sort of do research to see how something might plan out. But the values come in where it's like the NTJs are like looking at it, and it's like, so say it's a project to make, there's an example. Yeah, in the United States, they built this amazing stealth ship called the Zumwalt class. But it had far too many technologies, and it went over budget, and you had loads of these untested technologies on board. And in there, you could say the NTP is like, or the NTP way of looking at things just went completely overboard. And the NTJ way of looking at it might have been, yeah, we're going to grab this ship, but I think the NTJ would only want stuff on that ship that's tested, actually ready to install, not untested,
absolutely.
not untested stuff that they just think, oh, I wonder if it'll happen. I'll put this on there. I'll put this electromagnetic cannon on there, and then it's like, oh, we'll have this cannon that will shoot, and it'll be cheaper than missiles. And then the shells are then really, really expensive, and then all of this technology that doesn't work because it's too much new stuff. But so there is an attitude point of view where for the NTP, oh, it's new, we want to try it out. Whereas temperamentally, the NTJ is like, that's ridiculous. Use what works. This is a project. We're trying to get this to work. You're doing research. It's like the NTPs are like doing, and that's where Kersey would say that the NTPs are predisposed to reactive inquiry, research, and the NTJs are predisposed to proactive enterprise. And so maybe actually applying it and producing something that works.
Yeah, it's funny because a year or two ago, I had emailed Brad Schoenfeld just out of my frustration. Like, don't you get frustrated? I mean, we don't have it. We have very few answers. I mean, and I told him, I was like, I'm so envious of individuals who are going to live in 200, 300, 400 years, and they're going to have all the answers, and all they're going to need to do is apply it. And I'll never forget his email to me was like, but that's the fun of it. And I'm just like, no. So yeah, pretty sure it's some kind of like difference there in NTJ, NTP, but some people just seem to love the research. I mean, they don't mind at all that they don't have the answers. It's just the fun for them is the research, and just, I'll never understand it. I'm just, it's all about getting the results, like finding.
Right. Yeah. So I think that when that's your focus of attention, rather than doing it a different way or a novel way, then the results will sort of spring forth from that. And even when INTJ will have a creative idea, they'll probably ignore it, because if it doesn't fit in with the plan, it just gets ignored. Whereas now the issue then for NTPs is, especially ENTP, have an idea for this, a day later have an idea, and they don't then follow through on it. And then that's where you get development involved. And this is something that Dario thinks. So Dario thinks that this function here, this position, very much depends on development. So you can get, I mean, like most ENTPs are not inventors. And those ENTPs that are inventors have got much more developed TE. Now, what we can say, though, is that most ENTPs are good debaters. I mean, I could say on average, I'm prepared to say on average that the average ENTP is a better debater than an average any other type. That's just it's just the way that they are set up for that, and they have a predisposition towards doing that and taking the opposite point of view and even arguing things that they don't believe in. And let's see if they win the argument, even if they don't believe in it. And then the next night argue on the opposite side and still win. That's what they do. Debate trolls. Debate, that's what they can do. Because they're not wedded to a particular way of looking at something.
Mm-hmm.
For them, it's about internal consistency. But so I would say that's, but in terms of it's how much you use that function. So now we're into
what would you say is the second best type on average to be the best debater? ENTJ?
Well, Jeff and I think that Texas Senator Ted Cruz could be ENTJ. And he lays things out in a structured way. And he also did this thing where if he was talking about temperament and artisans, he'd go, artistry, audacity, adaptability. It's like, that is tricky. I think that's going to depend on the person. But I might say, like, if they could be bothered to get up there, maybe INTP.
Okay.
But debate, like, I think that's more about the individual. It depends on what's. Okay, I would say TPs.
Okay.
TPs, but again, TJs might be good if the way they debate, they can like come up with lots of facts.
Right. Okay.
Like I once did a thing with Dario where I said something that was like a theory and like it was like internally consistent and made sense, and Dario came up with the facts, and then I said, Dario, your TE just destroyed my TI. So it can be done either way.
That's great.
And you can also have and now if you're talking about persuasion, which is related to debating, you could say that having good demeanor, good people skills, someone like Bill Clinton, like the Kersey people think, and I think Bill Clinton ESFP.
Define persuasion, because I mean the only thing I can think of when you say that is, I mean, this would be a method I would never want to use, never think about using. It's like, no, here's the facts, period. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I mean, persuasion.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, well,
like via emotion, via what? Like what? You just trying to be a nice, sweet talker, and I mean.
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of three ways. There's the like in the Greek times, you'd have like the appeal to the emotion.
Okay.
The appeal to the biases and the audience, and there would be an appeal to character, and it's almost like, well, if you follow this person, and it's like if it's like an esteemed individual, and it's like, well, they do it, follow that, and that works in advertising where you have like a respected. I mean, if you've got a young kid and Tom Brady's, and you got a young kid that's an American football fan, and Tom Brady's endorsing a product, and it's like, I'll buy that, and then the dad will say, "But you're 8, you're not shaving yet." Yeah, but he endorsed it, Tom Brady.
Okay,
so it's like, so there's that, and then
I just feel so unaffected by stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that's because you're FE polar, in a good way. That's like the good part of it. And rationals go towards
I would
reasons.
never think to use this to persuade someone. Like, oh, do it because they're doing it. I would think that would never work.
Yeah. And also another one of the things is that INTJs are bad at doing that. So when they try it,
right. That's fair.
But a good way of doing it, and this is what Martin Luther King Jr. did, is that he used something akin to an empathy meme, which is a rhetorical syllogism. This is basically where you build an argument which appeals to what people already believe in. So when Martin Luther King talked to the audience about, and he was talking about advocating black rights, but he was talking about the Constitution, and he was talking about what the Bible said. And when he's quoting from the Bible and saying all men were created equal, and you're quoting from the Constitution, and if your listener believes in the Constitution, believes in the Bible, and he showed what you believe in, that what he wants you to believe naturally follows from what you already believe. Therefore, you should believe it in order to be consistent. And that's sort of like the clever approach of doing it. If you know what somebody believes, and you can make the connection between what they already believe and what you want them to believe, you'll be able to persuade them.
See, I don't have a problem with that as long as I believe it.
Yeah, because that's the rational approach of like somebody who's it's like it's basically you get them to a place which is consistent with their beliefs. And so, like I said, he was able to do that because he knew the Constitution,
right,
he knew the Bible.
Right.
You got the Bible saying all men are created equal. But then say, well, there's black people, like, and it counts for women as well. All people created equal. Therefore, the human beings. Therefore, there's yeah, it's right. It's like, so it's like, and if you, and like I said, if they really believe in the Constitution, and it's like if it's consistent with it, if it's consistent with what they already believe, because most people want to be consistent, unless they'll get some like cognitive dissonance or something. Right. So, Model V. So this is my entry in a modern art competition, or at least it could be. Right. So, one of the things in Model V I'll go over is, so we got INTJ there. I'm going to go over my idea of, what sort of my idea, or elaboration, is what is it? What a very important thing about Model V. There's the clubs, but I'll get into the thing about Verting. And that is the fact that you have your default functions, and for an introvert, their default functions are introverting, and their situational functions are extroverting. And I'll dive into that with this by comparing the default operating modes. So that would be on
yeah,
here.
You're gonna have to help me out here.
Yeah. So I'll do the introvert first, then the extrovert. So is that clear enough? I'm gonna try.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll just see if I can like go for something that's just a touch better by I'll just open, if I open up the PDF viewer, and if I change the I'll just I'll let you do the honors once I've got back to this.
Okay.
Right, if you, so Ben, that's no improvement, but one moment, if I go in, it should rejig itself and get super sharp, especially if I close that bit there, and if I go in a bit more, and then it almost like an SVG file oh, and that's something from Dario's PDF. He had that on his website. Right, but I'm going back here. In fact, I could probably open the other one. Let's see if that works. Hopefully nothing breaks if I go like this. I think we're okay. It's appeared there. Right, that's ENTJ, that's INTJ. Right. So I'm saying that in the introverts, that they default to using their introverting functions. So I'll read through this in case people are watching it small. Default operating mode. Right, yeah, I'll go through this. In earlier versions, I called this consciousness, then cognizance, but I realized that FI is more than just being cognizant of FI.
Who is speaking here? This is authored by?
Me.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Can you elaborate on that?
On what?
Please?
On the cognizance thing.
No, on FI being more than just, yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah. I'll just read it through, then I'll elaborate on it.
Yes.
Right. But I realized that FI is more than just being cognizant of FI. It's about how it operates in the individual. In some folks, there might not be much FI to be cognizant of. Also, FE is more than just paying attention to somebody else's feeling state. So it's how does the function affect the way one operates? It's not just being, say, aware of information. So someone with good FI might be good at putting themselves into somebody else's shoes. So I would say I would tag that as imaginative FI. They might assert a certain core principle that they themselves believe in that doesn't come from their environment, and I would call that assertive FI. They might be good at being able to judge the relationships of somebody. So that would be an example. So with harmonizing FI, they have a feeling of how they feel about everyone and everything. And it's not like if you ask an ENTP, like there's one person on Facebook, I won't mention his name, but a certain famous ENTP resembler in the typology community, somebody famous for socionics, and he said that he didn't know who to invite to his wedding. He only knew that he needed to invite the relatives and the best man. He didn't know which friends to invite. And this was done in a public group. So it's like an FI Dom would have feelings of, it would be like great, like how they feel towards all these, they would be able to know who to invite.
Mm-hmm.
But to someone who's FI Polar, it's like, well, these are all my friends. They've not got those fine distinctions between a close friend, less of a friend, an acquaintance, somebody like, they've not got those feelings of psychological distance. And so we could say that is the cognizant part, but then that's then used in application into then how they interact with those people, depending on how they feel about these people. Like, and it's like, oh, I feel I will trust with this person's more, I don't know quite as well, and how they feel. So it's like, it's then affecting the way the person operates. So it's not just cognizance, it's not just reading FI information, it's like how the function affects the way someone operates. Or with FE is not just reading someone's body language, reading FE data, it's also about what they value and then what they do for other people. And again, it comes through in the way the person operates. The same with SE. SE is not just sensory acuity. It's not just being observant. It's then how does that then affect the way you operate? When you're in a state of SE, it means operating in a certain way of really being absorbed into your environment, in the zone, reacting instinctively, all of these sort of things which are part of the way of operation. And one of the reasons I probably said operating is that these are all verbs. Even these are cognitive processes are verbs. That's why I make sure I put the ing in there, and I'll put in not even introverted and extroverted, because it's like, when was it extroverted? That's past tense. When was it extroverted? When was it introverted? That makes no sense. It's like, and so it's like when we know what introverting is and extroverting is. So I go into that in a lot of, I spent many months on this, getting it, like doing it on a typewriter and then scanning it in and then improving it. So I will take you through this, the in-depth So one of my hopes with Model V is that try and get the most useful understanding of introverting, extroverting out there, if other people think that. So default operating mode in the introvert is introverting, i.e. subjectifying internalizing. Do you agree you do that?
Yes.
By default. And Alfred Binet, before Jung, would call that introspecting. Because there's the guy, you know that little book that I read from? The guy in there, well, actually, he did a little bit of plagiarism as well. Because he did a lot of quotes from Marie-Louise von Franz, and he didn't attribute the examples to Marie-Louise von Franz. But he himself in here says, I wonder if it's in the NTP, in here says that Alfred Binet came up with internospection and externospection. No, he called it introspection, but he called it externospection before Carl Jung. So like this idea of like a different version of introverting and extroverting. And he said that Carl Jung should have mentioned Binet came up with, say, I think I put it on here. Oops. Did I put externospecting? Yeah,
yes,
externospection. Yeah.
You think it was just a happy coincidence?
Maybe. You never know these.
I don't know. I mean, that is such a specific word.
Well, maybe that Carl Jung, I mean, was Swiss, so maybe he knew French. Because generally, like, if you're a kid being educated in Switzerland, you're learning French and Italian and German. Anyway, so subjectifying internalizer. So I got here, and then of course SI. SI is not as internal as the other introverting functions, however. Certain subfunctions are, e.g. SI imaginative, sensory imagine, and we went through that, I think, the first time out of this. So, hopefully it's more than a trilogy, but the first one that we did that in this trilogy, hopefully a quadrilogy and more, is that the first one in this series, yeah, that's better. The first one in this series that you mentioned and we got around to the topic of your SI things in terms of that subfunction, the ability to imagine things, and I think you were saying that you improved that. I can't remember. You said you improved something. Oh yeah, that was it. About the thinking.
Yeah.
Thinking linguistically, and before that was mainly visual.
Right. Yeah, thinking more in words now, and whereas before it was. I mean, I think when it happened, when I was younger, it would mostly be when I was talking to myself in my mind or imagining conversations with other people. But not very much. And as of lately, I don't know if it's because of speaking with other people online. Like, this is the most I've ever spoken with people. But yeah, I find myself thinking, like, actually thinking in words, not just thinking in concepts.
Wow.
Like, not just imagining the exchange, like me talking with somebody, like I might actually stop and think the words to myself, like, wow, this person is whatever, like, and I'm holy cow, like I actually thought that sentence out, and it's just weird for me.
So could you give an example of a concept that you would think about
without
words?
Yeah, like planning things in my mind a lot. Like when I'm, for example, in the last few years going out for a photo shoot, I'll just think about being there, and I'll think about the sun over me and the light, like how the light's changing and how high the wall goes and the shadow comes down, like all these things. Are there going to be people walking by? What time of the day is it? I should avoid 3 p.m., 5 p.m. Everyone's getting off of work. I don't want to be out in my bikini in front of people. Everything, the weather, the wind, the humidity. I can't set my mirror up here because the wind's coming from the north. I mean, and so I'm thinking about all of this, but it's like, I'm not actually thinking in words like I'm talking to you now. I'm just imagining the scenario, and I might think like, yes, like do this, or wait, no, I can't do that, or like that's the extent of it. But the majority is just imagining the situation and planning.
Right. Does it have all of the sensory detail?
It's hazy. It's like a blurry dream. It's more of like planning and trying to like plan the situation, but yeah, it's not very detailed,
Right.
but I mean, yeah, it has
Yeah.
like the path, the tree there, but it's not detailed in a sense of like.
Yeah. So what you'll get with SI DOMs, when you talk to them about this, it's detailed. And that's why when they read the
Okay.
novels, again, it's like what your focus of attention is. Their focus of attention is like they want, like in a description of say Game of Thrones or something, they want a huge amount of sensory detail because it's very evocative.
Yeah, see, when I watch movies especially, and even like recalling things from the past, I will not remember the details of the environment. I mean, ask me like okay, for example, if I meet someone new and I'm talking with them for 10 minutes and then we part ways and then someone was like, hey, what color shirt were they wearing? I have no idea. I mean, I don't even see any of that. It's gotten better as I've gotten older because I've realized just how ridiculous this is. Like I couldn't even tell you what this person was wearing. I had no idea. I sat with them for like an hour and talked and I had no idea. It's that bad.
I have a bad one for you. I was doing an event with Jeff where he was pretending to be somebody else, and then he came back, and Jonathan, INFJ Jonathan said he changed his shirts. I never noticed. So when INFJ, then Dom is telling me that, I was like, oh dear. But I was busy hosting the event. I have an excuse, but it's like.
Yeah. You know, I used to make it a game with one of my former employers. He would pick me up and we would drive to the job. But it was so funny that I would get in his truck with him and we'd be driving for 10 minutes and I'd be looking out the window and it would hit me like, what color shirt is he wearing? And I wouldn't look over. I'd be like, do I know what color shirt? Nope. And like it's gotten better as I've gotten older and realized like, look around, look at your surrounding. Like, you know, is there anyone potentially dangerous here? Or, you know, something like that. Just, I need to learn to start picking up things in my environment more. It's definitely not something natural to me, though.
Right, and there's an example of your default state being introverted, subjectifying, internalizing.
Yeah, right.
And I would say situationally, and I give an example later on, you're riding a horse, you're going to be extroverting. Right, to make sure, like, especially if you're learning to ride a horse, I'm going to direct that attention out. And even when you should be extroverted, you said when you're driving,
right?
Like, you can't stop yourself introverting.
Right. Yeah. No, it's really, really terrible, and that is what's scary. It can be very scary.
Right. So here we go.
And I've almost gotten into bad accidents like that.
Right. Okay. So internal, however, certain subfunctions. Okay. Yeah. So directing attention. Internal.
Can you elaborate on internal bodily harmony?
Well, your guardians, as Jeff says, guardians will tell you about their medical problems. They just sort of know how they feel. Like, so even when someone's in a state of NI, they can like, and you may have talked about this earlier in the series, where they're having almost like an out-of-body experience, and they're just in their mind and they're just out of their body. Whereas the SI Dom guardians, and especially SI Doms, they're aware of their bodies and how they feel and like what's good for them, and they're very particular with their food. Whereas artisans tend to sort of eat more, tend to be more omnivorous, and the SI Doms tend to be a bit more particular, and it's like how things affect them, their level of comfort. So it's like that comfort sensing part of socionics is true. It's just the SI is not just comfort sensor. I think it's three things. It's this internal sensory imagination, it's the comfort sensing, and it's this instinct to want to do things in the authorized, correct way because that's the safest way to do it.
Safest way, like.
Yeah.
Like
can't be blamed if you're going by the books, following the instructions. Not my fault. I follow the instructions because it's part of the temperament. It's the instinct, and it's like, well, it's like the guardians just think that when somebody like, it's like, why wouldn't you read the instruction manual? They know what to do. It's like, and in most cases, unless the person's really smart, it's like the book's going to be right because it's like if someone's. But you'd have to be someone really smart to say, yeah, that book's out of date. I know what I'm doing. But most people, it's like, you know, read the instructions. And that's the first instinct of the Guardian: read the instructions, because otherwise someone's being arrogant and sort of doing it themselves. And so they have that trust authority. And so part of them reading the instructions is that, well, it's the best way to go. There'll be fewer mistakes. And one of the things Guardians will say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they're looking to stabilize the situation. That's another part of their instinct, stabilize the situation. So it's when Vanderhoop talked about the SI Dom, he talked about the conservative farmer, and his SI Dom profile is Guardian as heck. So it's like Vanderhoop was the first one to see Guardians, and that's 1937. So hardly anyone's read Vanderhoop, though, even though it was mentioned 10 times in Gifts Different, which is this famous MBTI book, right? At least Isabel Myers mentioned Vanderhoop, but hardly anyone read him. I only found out about Vanderhoop from Shalina. Hardly anyone's read Vanderhoop, but he's brilliant. So then, anything else? Do you need anything else on SI harmonizing?
Oh yeah, hold on. No, okay. I just wanted to finish reading through that again. Okay, no, we can continue.
All right. So yeah, I think that I would assert that one's experience of default mode is more nuanced and practiced than one's situational mode. So for example, your SE mode, you're not really seeing all the details, are you, Hailey? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Compared to the SE dump, and again, it's because it's where someone's.
But a lot of it is that I just don't care.
Exactly. Your focus determines your reality. It's what you care about.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to look at valued functions and unvalued functions, and generally what someone's values are, what they pay attention to. So, for example, another thing they did was maybe it was somebody wrote about a dinner party, and they'd have the 8 types and the things that they would pay attention to at the dinner party. So it's like INTP might pay attention to like the logic of the argument. The feeling types might pay attention to. What amused you about that, Hailey? Just the stereotypes or what?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, do you think an INTP is not going to pay attention to the logic of the argument?
I don't know.
They're going to be focused on it. They're not going to be able to avoid it. And it's like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by all these people who can't think straight. Put that wine down. Right. So, whereas the feeling types, they'll be looking at, God, look at that INTP over there. His facial expression, he's not contributing to the atmosphere, or look at the INTJ over there. When was the last time she smiled? And it's like, because they're like focusing on.
Yeah, that would be pretty accurate, because I'd be thinking about, man, I hope this is tasty, and 2, how do I get out of here like without this being awkward?
Yeah, so it's like the focus of attention depending on the function. And so the intuitive, like ENFP there, if they're not flipping talking all the while, they'll be like, ping, ping, the idea it sets off in their mind. Oh, it's like they're off thinking about it. So you certain things you can pick up. So the experience of the default mode is more nuanced and practiced than one's situational mode. Do you agree with that assertion?
So the situational mode versus the default mode.
So for you, situational mode is extraverting, directing your attention outwards.
Yeah, not what I prefer or enjoy most of the time, and I definitely have to put energy into doing it.
Yeah, but your best form of extroverting is thinking.
Right.
Extroverting thinking. Really double up on the verb concept. For introverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, introverting. One can introvert without an external stimulus, e.g. whilst reflecting. And one can even introvert, i.e. subjectify, an outside stimulus by placing more attention on the subjective reaction to the stimulus rather than the empirical aspects of it.
Yeah.
BV. Oh yeah, here we go. BV, subjectifying, elaborating on Dario Nardi in 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, page 192. Introverts are comfortable doing many introverted activities. JCF, so Jungian cognitive functions in slot 1, best, so NI. 3 will be TI, well. FI, well enough, but you're probably better than that. 7 gets by with development, SI. And then I've got the quote here from Jung with a little bit of extra added in to aid understanding. Jung on introversion. Interest does not move because the way he would talk about libido and that lot. So this way, I think it will make it more understandable for people, because what he meant, interest does not move towards the object, but recedes towards the subject. And then I'll go to explain what that means. Introverting, i.e. the state of introversion, means the subject, person, has more interest in its subjective experience than in the object or external stimulus. E.g., sound is not an object, but it can hold one's attention outside of oneself. Everyone whose attitude is introverted thinks, feels, and acts in a way that clearly demonstrates that the subject is the chief factor of motivation, while the object or stimulus, such as sound, I interpolate, at most receives only a secondary value. Introversion is active when the subject wills a certain seclusion in the face of the object. It is passive when the subject is unable to restore or maintain interest in the object. So, for example, you might be in a dinner party and bored by everybody there, and you just introvert and think about something else.
Yeah.
Or you might be, say, trying to read a book, and you're actively blocking out, trying to like concentrate on something. And
Oh no, I don't have a problem with that. I can block.
Well,
I can block things out like you
bully
don't
for
even
you.
imagine.
Bully for you, because it's hard for me. ADHD problems. I've got to resort to
That's
these,
crazy.
and they hurt my head because they're like proper extra thick ear defenders, or ear shields, is probably called in English. But I won't get onto English. Introversion is active when the subject wills a certain seclusion in the face of the object, so you can do it easily. Bully for you. It is passive when the subject is unable to restore or maintain interest in the object or stimulus, and interest metaphorically turns away from the object back to the desire. So that's my sort of explanation, because the original was a bit more complex. I'll go for that again. Okay, so half of this is Jung and then the half is me, to make it clearer. Introversion is active when the subject wills a certain seclusion in the face of the object. It is passive when the subject is unable to restore. Now to me. Or maintain interest in the object or stimulus, and interest metaphorically turns away from the object back to the subject. So that's when he was talking about an inward turning of libido. What he meant by that was an inward turning of interest. And there was something about, I read the start of another Jung book before sending it back because I wasn't happy with the binding. I expected stitched binding, and that was, but at least I read the bit at the beginning about libido correlates to interest. So you could think, and Carl Jung said it's not just sexual Freud. That's you. You're just being a. I was going to say nympho, but that's solely female. It's just you're just sex obsessed, Carl Freud. Look how many children you got. But he would say libido is not just for sex; it's for interest in many things. And so the libido probably is manifested in the degree of interest. So it's like if someone shows a lot of interest in something, then you can say, oh, the level of libido is high, as evidenced by the level of interest displayed. So When introversion is habitual, one speaks of the introverted type. Telling, because it means actions of and feelings in a TI dom will often be subjective introverting. Actions of and feelings in. Oh, because it says an acts in a way that clearly demonstrates acts. Telling, because it means actions of and feelings in a TI dom will often be subjective introverting. Right. So even though actions and feelings, most of their activities are going to be colored by that default state of introverting. So, and then a bit here.
I have to say that's such a great description.
Which bit?
Just the whole paragraph. I mean, the first line, interest doesn't move towards the object but recedes towards the subject. It's funny, and I told you I was going to have a problem speaking today. Sometimes I just have a problem getting it out. It's like I know what I mean in my mind. Like I see the I understand it, but I just cannot bring the words. And when I read the first sentence, I knew immediately, but you just you described exactly what I understood in my mind with like the remainder. And I have to say that this is what I experience, especially with music. When I want to just zone out in my mind, I will put on very loud music, but it's like the music is evoking, I guess I'm almost going into my NIFI loop because I just really enjoy that and I just zone out. But it's like the music is evoking that in me, but I don't hear it. Like I'm not focusing on it. It's almost like I don't hear it. But the minute I take my headphones out or I stop the music, just the feeling is kind of hampered down. It's not the same. I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah. I mean, it's not just sound. I mean, I find this with many other stimuli where it's just the interest is within me. The object is just kind of background noise.
Yeah, or it's just the starting point.
Right.
So with music for me, like very evocative music for me is Christopher Franke on Babylon 5 and certain parts of Tchaikovsky, but Christopher Franke is just genius. Yeah, so this bit here about the TI and FI DOMs, slight digression, but I think it's relevant. Actually, it actually is. Thus, the introverted rational types, so yeah, FI and TI DOMs, thus the introverted rational types unquestionably have a reasoning judgment. Only it is a judgment whose leading note is subjective. So this is what I mean here. Jung really meant by introverted subjective and by extroverted objective, but what he meant by objective was empirical. And so part of me is like, just call it subjective. Thus, the introverted rational types unquestionably have a reasoning judgment. Only it is a judgment whose leading note is subjective. And this is the beautiful part. The laws of logic are not necessarily deflected, since its one-sidedness lies in the premise. So it's like the difference between a valid argument and a sound argument. So, for example, you can have a valid argument where that would be where you can have garbage premises, but it's internally consistent and logical from those premises. And if it's internally consistent, it's said to be that is a valid argument, but unsound. Whereas a sound argument would have both necessary premises and all of the internal and all of the logic would be reasonable as well. So, so for example, so a lot of socionics has premises which are a bit, but it then follows logically, and I would say, well, that says something about your premises. Look where you've ended up. And so there's a difference there between, that's what it means about the laws of logic. So what you get with INTP, it's like you usually get a rational elaboration of subjective premises as like a thought experiment and see how it goes. But the premise being iffy means that it's like the iffiness. The iffiness colors the whole argument. Mm-hmm. And that iffiness is because of the subjective factor.
Okay.
Or it might be you might have a factor that's absolutely true, but you might get to a place and it's like, oh, that's internally consistent, but it's not the whole picture, is it, Mr. INTP? Because you've not included all of the factors. That's the thing. You've got to include all of the factors, or as many as possible. It's like if you're talking about a person and you just say, because this person is this type, they do this. And it's like, but what about non-type factors? Didn't think about that. Or it's not. A better example would be nature and nurture. If you only consider the nature factor and you ignore the nurture factor, or it's like, so it's like you can be internally consistent and it's like, this definitely follows from this. This thing it's following from is definitely true. But what about these other things that are true? And there might be something else that's equally true that might contradict that. So that's why the socionics people need to realize that just because it's internally consistent doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean it's objective. And that annoys me when people say that TI is objective. Because to me, objective means true.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. I mean, there's certain things like mathematics and that's like, where it's like, okay, that's completely internally consistent. And it doesn't matter how many times you do it, you're going to get that answer. So the laws of logic are not necessarily reflected as one-sidedness lies in the premise. The premise is the predominance of the subjective factor existing beneath every conclusion and colouring every judgment. So a TI statement can be logically valid, internally consistent, but still unsound. Right. Now the situational row. When you situationally extrovert, situational operating mode in the introvert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing externalizer. Compare Alfred Binet's externospection, or I'll call it externospecting. Because it's like, if it's a mode, it's a verb, it's an active thing that you're doing. Compared to the personal row in Victor Golenko's Model G, the situational row is less specific. So, for example, in Victor's row, he would have for me the personal row, and it would be Ben uses NE, FE, SE, and TE when he's on his territory. So it's like, okay, when I'm comfortable. And I'm like, hang on a minute, but what about when I'm forced to use those functions when I'm not comfortable? There's a train coming towards me. I'm not on my comfort zone, but I'd better extrovert right now. So it's situational. So whilst it is true that right now I'm being a little bit more expressive because I'm on my territory, it's not the only instance in which I'm going to use to be extroverted. Or it's like Van der Hoop gives, in fact, Van der Hoop gives an example in a moment. I'll better shut up and read out previous Ben, who has written this out for us. Compared to the personal row in Victor Golenko's Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g. the TI and X resembler becoming expressive when talking on its territory, e.g. about interest, or this bloody model here, or more open with feelings when talking to someone he has a good relationship with. However, situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, Jungian cognitive functions, which are of opposite verting to the type, e.g. situations which draw on the extroverting functions of the introvert. And then I have the example here. Van der Hoop, for example, the psychiatrist Van der Hoop, a INTP resembler trained by he called himself an introvert of thinking type with subsidiary intuition. He INTP'd up his own naming system. Right. And he wrote this, Van der Hoop wrote in Conscious Orientation about taking up horse riding again after a long interval. He stated that in order not to be thrown by the horse, his attention was riveted on the totality of my sense experience and my reactions to it. So he was in a state of SE, extroverting, instincting, because of the situation. Not because he was on his territory, but because the situation demanded it. And so here we go here. In practice, a real person is best described as dynamically alternating between degrees of extroverting and introverting and moving along a Vertner spectrum. This can be a moment-by-moment change. Also, a real person resembles rather than is a type, hence TI-next resembler. In my humble opinion, even though a type resembler can do atypical things, they tend to do it in a typical way, e.g. a by-the-book SITX-like artist. And then Jung on extroverting, or extroversion. With this concept, I denote a manifest relatedness of subject to object in the sense of a positive movement of subjective interest towards the object. One should speak of active extroversion when deliberately willed, and of passive extroversion when the object compels it. Turn that bloody music down! I should have put object, square brackets, or stimulus, because music's not an object. When object compels it, i.e. attracts the interest of the subject of its own accord, even against the latter's intention. Should the state of extroversion become habitual, the extroverted type appears. So my aim there is for people to understand introverting and extroverting. Do you think they will, or do you think there's a good chance if they that I've tried to explain it as well as I could?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed the bit about the object, like this subjective. Gosh, I cannot talk today. The conversation, the paragraph up before this. Gosh, I just cannot speak today. I'm sorry. Some days I just don't have it. And today I don't have it. Is the one
about the horse or this one?
No. The one regarding how like you just your interest in the object just you're drawn in by it, and it's just it doesn't become like it's not about the object anymore. It's just about like you internalizing from the object. Yeah. That was great.
And if that shows your preference as well, like you relate more to the.
Yes, absolutely.
So now what I did is I did a different version for the extrovert.
Okay.
Because I realized, because I did a different version for the extrovert, just to understand the difference. So default operating mode. Right. That's the same as before. All that stuff about being cognizant of stuff. Right. Default operating mode in the extrovert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing, externalizing. See Alfred Binet before Jung. So I've got some things here that are not in the other one. Default as in defaults to, i.e. prefers. One's experience of default mode is more nuanced and practiced than situational mode. Okay, so we did that before, but we've got some new stuff here. For extroverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data such as immediate sensory instinctual data, SE. I'll get loads of details in this one. Social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions. Oh, there's a bit of a distortion.
Uh-oh.
We've got that passive extroverting going on where its attention is being drawn away. Let's see if it is I. Perhaps if you muted your mic and then switch it to see if it goes.
One moment.
And if you put it back on. Yeah, it's you. Perhaps you can have some mic. If you alternate your mic. Right, here we go. So she was going to speak when she wishes to. So yeah, I would say SE, because I'm big on reframing sensing as instincting. It's also consistent with the Kersey artisans and the Guardians, because there's an artisan instinct and the Guardian instinct. So the artisan instinct, folks, is towards excitement, is towards being adaptable, is towards being bold, is towards variety, and yearning for impact. And so that boldness and that audacity and to interact with the environment in a sort of exciting way, whereas the instinct of the guardian is towards authority, in that it trusts authority, is towards the tried and true, is towards wanting to belong, seeking security. That's part of the instinctual needs of way SI works in guardians. So it's sensory instinctual. And also there's going to be more of a relationship to the past and looking for consistency of the present with the past because of what worked in the past. And with the artisans, it's about in this particular moment, what works best in this particular situation. And usually the instincts and impulses that the artisan has, if they've got no baggage and they're just reacting purely on the situation, then those reactions will be relevant to the situation. So that's why the best sporting people are usually artisans and usually SE DOMs. Also, another thing with body language from before. If you see Shayna Baszler, I know she's a wrestler now, but she used to be a legit martial artist. The way she walks, that's a little bit of SE going on there. Yeah. Walking with a swagger like that. So again here, I'm giving 4 kinds of extroverting here. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world. It's not just sensing, it's also action. Artisans want to do stuff. SE DOMs want to do stuff. Action in the world and empirical data such as the immediate sensory instinctual data and how you respond and react to it. The cut and thrust of battle and in sport, that sort of feedback, the sensory feedback on the environment you're interacting with. Social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions and tone of voice, signifying feelings. So I would say that's extroverting your feeling. You're going outwards towards those feeling-related things, these signals. Or if you're directing your attention towards facts, numbers, practical application, then you're extroverting your thinking. The world, if you are directing your attention towards the world as possibilities, connections between ideas and situations that can be articulated and debated, because there, I would say that's NE. Because it's like, if I can say, well, there's this concept here and this concept here, and it's like, whereas Hailey might be in NI mode, I just know. Oh, thank you, Hailey. Thanks for externalizing that.
Yeah, let me just interject. As many times as I feel like I just know something, I can almost never bring myself to say it, because how do you bring data, like hard data, into this? I just know. Yeah, okay, sure, you just know. I mean, I just could never, even if I really feel like I do, and like I do, I could never say that to someone, because I know I have nothing to back it up.
Also, I think part of the FE break in INTJ is they don't care if people don't believe them anyway.
Yeah, there's that too. But I mean, talking about like something where you have like some sort of law or, hard data, but maybe there's like some piece of something that's not yet established, but I feel so strong, like I feel like I just know that this is what it is, but I feel like I would never bring that, just because, like, I would never bring that to the table because I feel like it's so ridiculous.
So Hailey, if you logged out and logged back in again, basically if you refreshed your screen and reloaded it would still continue on, as long as you come back.
Certain?
Yeah, because I've done it myself. As long as you come back within about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, otherwise it will end.
Okay, well, I'm not so sure. You're asking me to press the refresh button, is that correct?
Yeah, basically Control R if you want to. Okay. And just reload your browser, not your whole computer. Right, anyway, folks. So, getting back to the instincting part of it's not just, if you think about artisans and guardians, it's like, yeah, there's more than just extroverting your...
Okay.
There we go. No, it's perfect. There we go.
Wow, interesting. I thought it was going to kill the whole thing.
That's part of the negativist INTJ. Which is and that's against the NE as well. No, we'll die.
Yeah.
It's only a new theory. Okay, instincting. Maybe certain INTJs, you need to say, hey, Bitcoin, a little bit too risky there. Right. That's a private joke.
What should I say, Monero?
I don't even know what that means.
Privacy. But that defeats the whole point.
Is that a coin?
Yes. Well, yes.
Right. Yeah. I was just going to say something for people out there. Oh yeah, and I think I said this to Hailey, that the government knew and were able to track down the people that got paid in the Bitcoin for not ransom
that's
things.
Where Monero and Pirate Chain comes in.
Yeah, but it's like the thing is though, back it by gold. Have it linked to real gold, and then the price, then it's stable. I'll just say one thing. So I eventually worked out what Peter Schiff was saying. It sort of clicked to me when he said unit of account. So basically, there's like three functions of money. One is that it should be the way for to have a good something that for something to act well as money, it needs to be a medium of exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be a store of value, and it needs to be a unit of account. So thinking about unit of account, so that would be, okay, well, you wouldn't want to do all of your business dealings in Bitcoin because the price keeps going up and down. So it wouldn't be very good. Like, so for instance, you've got a contract for someone to buy something from you for a certain amount of Bitcoin, but the price might be lower than when you did it, and you might lose it. So it's not stable enough.
Well, I mean, I kind of deal with the same thing, wanting to buy stuff in US dollar, but being here in Europe, I'm like, what would I rather do? Pay more in euros or pay more in shipping fee from the US? And I try to figure out what's going to be cheaper. I mean, it just is what it is.
Yeah, but Hailey, it's not like half. Like Bitcoin can change a lot. I mean, US dollar's going down the toilet, but it's not going there as quickly as. Like Bitcoin has changed so much. Like,
think about when they implement some sort of a government digital currency.
Yeah, and then, do that in
you've
Russia.
Got everything on there, everything listed and logged. I mean, you want to mow your neighbor's. You've got your kid want to mow your neighbor's yard for $20, and the kid gets taxed on that $20. I mean, imagine the need for privacy.
Yeah, they're definitely going to do that.
They're
going to do that in China, and they're going to do it in Russia. The digital, I've heard about the digital ruble, the digital yuan, and basically anything electronic. You're not going to pay for it. Like,
they're trying to flush cash out right now.
Don't be paying your assassins with a credit card.
Yeah. Well, then don't pay in Bitcoin either. You want to get some Monero or Pirate Chain or. Yeah. But that's the thing. You don't. I mean, I hate even saying it, and I mean, I don't have any of that, of course. But that's where the value comes in. You want privacy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's like okay, but going back to instincting. Role reversal. Usually it's Ben. Can we get back on topic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't help it. You bring up something
I started the tangent. I'm the guilty person. Right. Instincting. So disgust. So like I said, this is what is bound up with the sensory experience. It's like if you look under a stone and there's like something disgusting under there, it's like. Or what am I supposed to say? Is that FE or FI? Come on, what is it, folks? It's not. It's bound up with the sensory. It's disgust. It's part of the. It's an emotional reaction bound up with what you're sensing. Mm-hmm. So, or just like someone sings horribly. I would say that's an emotion. Whereas if someone sings in a certain way and it evokes a certain feeling, and like I said, there you've gone from the sphere of emotion into the sphere of feeling, which is something more sophisticated. I would also say that anything a dog can experience is usually within the realm of emotion and instinct. I would say a dog has emotion but not feeling. Like you can tell when a dog is like scared, angry, and it's like those are emotions. but I don't think a dog has guilt. Instincting, disgust, sexual attraction, excitement, fear of spiders, snakes, etc. shows the sensory is bound up with emotional reactions and an impulse to habit or impactful action. Kurz's artisans, SE wheelhouse, as I call them, seek stimulation and are audacious and adaptable. See Chapter 2 of Van der Hoop's Conscious Orientation. Limbic system reacts to sensory impulse before it reaches the neocortices, the sphere of feeling and thought. The latter includes perception and recognition. This is our evolutionary heritage. So the way the brain is designed, I can point and I can say that bit is the instinctive part. And that's what Dibley thought as well, but in the 1920s. Right, so BV, subjectifying, elaborating on Dario Nardi's 8 keys to self-leadership. Extroverts are comfortable doing many extroverted activities. Jungian in slot 1 best. And so like then for ENTJ, TE best, NE quite well, depending on how well they trust it. FE well enough. They just use FE for development. And SE. Is it going to be SE? No, it's going to be... no, it would be FE. That's it. FE would be in slot 7. That's it. I got mixed up with Model G mentally. Their slot 5 would be SE. That's right.
So it's also the ENTJ who are FE break?
No, they are SI break.
Okay.
So they overwork themselves.
Oh.
ENTJ, and they're not very good at remembering sort of irrelevant sort of sensory details.
So is there any other type resembler who's FE break?
Yes, ISTJ.
ISTJ. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But because they're a guardian, they're more attentive to manners. It's just that, we tend to talk like this and we don't have much affect display, and I'll read it out like an ISTJ would. I hope you're not getting bored, because that's been my experience with people. Jung on extroverting. With this concept, I denote a manifest relatedness of subject to object in the sense of a positive movement of subjective interest towards the object. One should speak of active extroversion when deliberately willed, and of passive extroverting when the object compels it, i.e., attracts the interest of the subject of its own accord, even against the latter's intention. Should the state of extroversion become habitual, the extroverted type appears. That's how they talk.
Yeah, I'm going to have to reread this again. You know, I told you that I'm very good at like zoning out. I just zoned out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, that's the passive introverting.
Yeah, hold on. Let me get through this. Okay. Okay.
Right. Situational mode. So the introverting is situational in ENTJ. And then I give some examples of when an extrovert might introvert. Situational operating mode in the extrovert is introverting, i.e. subjectifying, internalizing. And then I mentioned the stuff about SI before. For extroverting types, the situational operating mode is introverting. So, compared to the personal row in Victor Glencoe's Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g., oh, here we go. Completely, now it gets different. It can, e.g., the ENTP resembler Wilma Twindley in my stage play, Woman Arena, 2nd edition. New and improved. Although you don't get a natty little book protector that I got. That's me going to like ISTJ mode. Got to get book protectors on my book. Keep them nice. Before I write all over the inside of them. But with friction pen and neatly. Wilma Twindley in my stage play Wilma Arena on lulu.com is introverting as she prays and reflects. In soliloquy, but that's beside the point. Like, if it wasn't soliloquy, it should be doing it on her own. If it wasn't a stage play, it would be internal reflection. And it is whilst she reflects that she accesses her weakest function, FI. However, and so she's doing that situationally as an extrovert. However, the situational includes something the personal does not. the idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, Jungian cognitive functions which are opposite vertness of the type, e.g. situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert, such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder. Ti, consider how something might develop or have a moment of inspiration from within. Ni, run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences. Si, as a way to interpret it. Or pause to search their own feelings, such as judging what move to make in the romantic sphere or in a dilemma where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity. And this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally. Fi. Wrinkle. If a person thinks about its dilemma, Ti will, by definition, also be involved because they're thinking about it. CCBT. Any thoughts on that?
So the ENTP's weakest function is Fi?
Oh, yes. Indeed.
That's interesting. Do you have... Oh, pardon?
That's why they're not very good at... They don't have these feelings of... Like I said, you know when I said with the guy that didn't know who to invite?
Yeah, okay.
It's like he's not got those finely grained feelings of relationships between people. It's almost like... It's almost binary. Friends, not friend. Whereas for the FI, the FPs and people with FI that's more valued, it's like it's more nuanced.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's the thing. The stronger the function, the more nuanced it is.
Okay, right. Yeah, I understand.
Also with FI, like assertive FI, they don't stick to a principle. Like I said, you know when they debate one side one night and then the other side the other night. Win both sides of the argument.
Yeah. You know, when you brought that up earlier, I was thinking about the fact that if it's something that I know, I think I could be a good debater on that, but I just couldn't argue another side if I didn't believe in it.
Right.
So.
Whereas for ENTP, if you ask them about it, it's not about believing about it. It's like,
right.
to them, it's like, it's not about belief. It's like belief doesn't even come into it for them. It's about either whether it's internally consistent and whether it works. And the ESTP point of view, now this, I get this from NLP, because one of the founders was ESTP, Richard Bandler. And he would be like, how's that principle working out for you? Is it useful? And it's like, that's not the experience of the FI person about a principle.
But, okay, like in this situation, unless you actually debate for a living or it's just a hobby, I mean, what's the point? What's the point of debating something just for the hell of it?
So they can win the argument because
but why?
Like,
I mean,
because that's part of their self-image about how clever they are. ENTPs, they love to do that. Even Kersey, not known for using functions, got it into his profile because he was writing holistic profiles, and he wrote in for ENTP something like they annoy their friends by employing debate tactics. It's here we go. It's right there. Just to prove it to the audience, I'll read it out. They may, however, deliberately employ debate tactics to the disadvantage of their opponents, even when the opponents happen to be close associates and valued friends.
Oh, that's great.
Like, do they have valued friends, though? I mean, if you want to get really... It depends on the development of the person. The more developed the ENTP gets, eventually they're going to have... That also means that they can be fooled easily in the realm of not knowing if someone's really a close friend or is just preparing to be a friend.
Right.
Or, sorry, pretending to be a friend. And again, it's like... FI, extremely subjective. And again, if person's not got baggage, because you know when someone's got baggage, what they do is they project onto the other person. Oh, Donald Trump, he did a half smile. He's evil. He's got an evil. You know what I mean? It's like they're projecting their prejudices, and like you can get. But if someone, it's what Annie Linden says. But by the way, I do think Donald Trump's a narcissist. So like we can project onto certain people. if the person's got a fair witness position, say they're INFP, the person that they're reading, they've not got any like preconceptions about this person or any like opinion that they're going to project onto them, they're going to read them well. If they have any kind of baggage, they can project it onto that person that then distorts and corrupts their empathy. And I think empathy is FI related. If you're talking about like that real deep connection with somebody and seeing that similarity in somebody. And again, so FI averse people, ESTP and ENTP, they're not going on strong principles in terms of what they feel is the right move. It's like, what is the most effective move? What is the most expedient move? They're not going to stick to a principle that gives them a lesser result. They're going to think things through in terms of pros and cons, and they're not going to feel it at a core level. It might be, and if they chew a moral action, well, if I do that, they'll do that to me. Like almost like, if just take away the law, how many people would do bad things? Quite a lot.
How many would do bad things if we all had a 9mm on our hip?
Yeah, well, exactly. But I won't go down that route, even though I agree. But if
should I mute myself in between talking?
No, because you've not got the buzz anymore. If you right, so there's already a lot of people committing crime already. But again, just to say something about human nature, get rid of all the law. There's nothing to hold back people from committing crimes. That's when a lot of types, especially STPs and ENTPs, are just going to do. There's not going to be any FI to hold them back. Whereas a lot of INFPs would still be held back by what they feel is right, even if there was no legal consequence to their actions. And so it's like, that's why we have a legal. And Kersey, I was even informed that Kersey Senior thought 95% of juvenile delinquents were STPs. Now it makes sense if you think 90% of the population are artisan. If you think 90% of the population, I don't believe these statistics about 20% of people being intuitive. I think no way. That's not my experience of people.
Yeah, same.
It's like 10% at most intuitive.
I wouldn't even go that far.
Yeah. I mean, I can believe you. It's pretty low, really, because just of the experience that most intuitives have of finding it difficult to find people like them around, I would say, like. Because most of the time people take these tests, they're doing it in like these big organizations or something. Well chosen. Right choice. So...
Okay, so just a really cheeky question, really quick, drawing on this, and I'm sorry, I'm probably going to get the jargon wrong regarding like introverting, extroverting. Do you think it takes more energy for an extroverting type to introvert or for an introverting type to extrovert?
I think it takes more energy for the extrovert to for the introvert to extrovert, but I think it takes more concentration for the extrovert to introvert.
Okay.
And I sort of get, that's just something I've just pulled out of my head right now, but I can imagine what it's like as somebody with ADHD, like the amount of concentration it requires to like block stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
That the effort and concentration, like when they're doing something that's completely boring and they're really seeking stimulation.
Gosh, I just cannot imagine this. I mean, I understand, like, there's all the spectrum of individuals, and I'm sure it exists, and obviously it exists, but I just cannot.
Maybe we can say different kind of energy. So
okay.
So obviously, for the introvert to extrovert, usually that means physical energy is going to be involved. For the extrovert to introvert, mental energy is going to, or a different kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say you've got a
Yeah, that's fair.
An SE Dom child, and you're making them revise. That's when we require a lot of their energy to do something that's outside of their wheelhouse. Well, in terms of what they can do it. I mean, like they can be members of Mensa and all that kind of stuff. ESTP is. I mean, I know one. I actually had the card, the Mensa card, legit card. But it's preference, and the more you do something, the easier it gets. It requires less energy to do it. But generally, extroverting activities require physical energy, and introverting activities require mental energy.
Yeah, understood.
Where did it, right? And we've got a bit more. I think we're at the Jung on introversion. I did the wrinkle. Jung on introversion. Interest does not move towards the object, but receives towards the subject. Introverting. Right, it's pretty much the same as the other one, I believe. Attention outside of oneself. Right. Yeah, that's the same as before. I think I did this bit here. Yep. Now for the other part. So if I go back to how do I fit page? Right. So there's no way to do a full screen on this. Well, not very easily, because actually I might be able to. I might be able to do a full screen. Let's see if I have a presentation mode. Click to begin. Right, but that's about it. Right, I'm just going to go in a bit. Oh, it's not going in. Oh, it's not changed there. Right, escape. Go in. Now I'm going to talk about something else. Now I'm going to talk about.
Just want to let you know I've got about 10 to 15 minutes. So
10 to 15 minutes. Okay, we'll have to preview next time then. Part 2 of Model V. Right yes. Then. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the graphics. So if you do the honors when it pops up, please. Part 1. And then, okay, I'm going to go. Okay, so this is something about Dario, about what he was saying about the functions. Oh, and here, look at this. SITX. I wonder where he got that idea from with the X. What do we have on here? We have NITX for Hailey and PINX for Ben. Right then, so the ebook of this book by Dario may say where he got the idea from of of the putting the X in there. So SITX for ISTJ. So that's something about the ordering of the functions that I use in, but it's still pretty close. Okay, INTJ. So next time we're going to go over the ordering of, so we got this, the first big idea in Model V is basically super consistent with what Carl Jung was banging on about all the while, introverting and extroverting. So we've got that. And then this other idea is we've got this decrease in strength, but why does the strength decrease? And then we've got the clubs. We've got the club and the counter club. And this actually comes from Van der Hoop, where he would actually call it a nucleus and a counter nucleus. And then I thought, oh, what people, a nucleus of what? What do they mean? What do they mean, Ben? And eventually I changed it to something more familiar for people, the club. And so the clubs is a term from socionics, and basically it means NT, NF, ST, and SF. So it works very well for intuitives. So what we can say is, so what I would say is, and what Van der Hoop would say, all of the NT functions are strong in Hailey. She can do all of these 4, but these are valued and these are unvalued. But the NE is ignored. It's a backseat driver. It's ignored. Go away, NE. Shut up, NE. Backseat driver. TI, fishes or modest servant. I call that more modest servant now because it's serving other functions. Serves the TE, serves the NI. You've got your club functions, your NT functions, and then you've got your counter club functions, the SF functions. And so these functions also correspond to the Kersey 4 strategic roles. NI with TE corresponds to arranging contingencies, so basically planning for things going wrong and what to do. TE and NI correlates to coordinating resources towards long-term. So think of the CEO. ENTJ is very good at CEO because the role of CEO draws on TE and NI, practical thinking and intuition of development. And so when NI is with TE, it's intuition of development of objects and processes. When NI is with FE, it's intuition of people. It's development of people. Then these other ones, the TI and the NE draws on designing, and the NE and the TI, with the TI draws on inventor. So the furthest away from the role furthest away, but it's like of the 4 strategic roles, INTJ is best at arranging, then at mobilizing, then at designing, and then at inventor. That would be the hypothesis. That would be the hypothesis, but they're still okay at those. So, for example, another way of putting it is in INTP, you can get INTP scientists, and it's like their TE is not crap. Look at all the TE they're using in science. I mean, is it? I'll ask you a question, Hailey. Do you think there's quite a bit of TE in science? Oh, your mic's off. Oh, right, probably not sound in the background. Right, yeah. Thumbs up. Yeah, quite a bit of TE in science. So INTPs can do some TE if they pull the finger out. So NT functions strong, counter club functions. And that is backed up, folks. That is not just me. That is not just Vanderhoop. That is not just Model A. That is Dario mentioning it right here in the club functions. Here. Thus, what is normally referred to as the inferior process almost always lies in the bottom half of the scores. This suggests that pairs of functions such as sensing thinking, ST, SF, NT, NF are highly relevant. So, and then he gives an example. Overall, the results support Jung's and Meyer's notion of dichotomies, processes and operations. That is, there is a clear pattern where the top 2 functions score in the top half while their opposites score in the bottom half. For example, and this is the key one, and this is considered, my data is, so no, my model is consistent with Dario's data. If the highest scores are extroverted feeling with support processes, introverted intuiting, and extroverted intuiting, so basically it's saying FENX, then the bottom half is usually home to low scorers, sensing and thinking. So basically, the ST is the counter club in. So the idea of the clubs is consistent with, and I'm just going to show something before I go. So you've got the clubs here, the SFs. I just want to show Vanderhoop's diagram. I'll sort of climax with that.
Yeah, you know, I just wanted to add that when you introduced me to Kersey, that really helped solidify so many things. It just, I feel like there were a few grounding factors, like earlier on when not that I know much now, but when I knew absolutely nothing about any of this, and I was like, oh, am I like INTJ or INFJ? Which really, it was those two I was going in between. But it's the Kersey, NT, and the FE break that just solidified the type for me.
Yeah,
and it's funny because, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that also shows the validity of functions. I mean, I like Kersey, but I also like functions.
Yeah, definitely.
I usually like my function definitions to be consistent with Kersey, so I sort of anchor them to Kersey.
Okay.
So now Dario and Linda Behrens do the same thing with their SE and SI. Like when you read their SE definition, it's like basically describing the artisan temperament. And the same for SI. I mean, they even call SI. I mean, Dario, he calls stabilizing with the predictable standard. That's it. Well, it sounds like guardianing. And then immersing, that sounds like guardianing. Yes. So I've got the rings model. I'll do the rings model and then I will go. Then we can end. Right, I'm just going to get this on screen. Right, and then there'll be the... Right, and then we have share screen, and then we have window, and then we have that thing there, and that thing there. And so I want to show my sources. Show you're working. So there's model V. So you've got the NF functions there, and the ST functions there, as Dario said. And this is for ENFP. And what have we got here in this big field? We've got all the NF functions. NE, NI, FI, FE, and then you've got the counter nucleus. Now, I will show it for INTP. This is INTP. And I like what Van der Hoop's done, where it's got like the field of attention for the extrovert is bigger on the outside, because that's like the extroverting part. And then for the introvert, the inner world is bigger, more nuanced, more differentiated. And so there you'll see, for this is, so again, thinking introvert with intuition and subsidiary functions. So basically INTP, because we've got thinking introvert, TI, and then subsidiary intuition, and then, so basically just from here, you can see that the NI is really big.
Right.
And the NE, and so it's like, it's strong as a second, and all of the NT functions, NI, NE, TI, and TE. It's the same there. The club is like the nucleus, and then you've got the counter nucleus of FE, FI, SI, SE, just like there. And so what Van der Hoop thought was that in some people, the counter nucleus was not conscious. And so now Jung talked about stuff being like certain times it can be unconscious, and he talked about when the person is polarized. Now, this is a different kind of polarity from socionics that would call the break function the polar function, but that meant place of least resistance. This is a polarity as in, well, counter nucleus, the opposite pole of the personality. And so he would talk here about, I mean, you can get some INTJs, it's like they've almost got no SF about them, like, especially if they're really young. Like really young INTJs and INTPs. Where's your SF? Where are your SF functions? All I'm getting is NT. But he said here, and I'll just finish with this, and this is an example of the counter nucleus, the counter club. So, and there's an unhealthy example first, then a healthier example. And so it's here about a counter nucleus in the mode of orientation. So this is for INTP. Sensual feelings and conventional moral evaluations. I am sticking my neck out by saying conventional moral evaluations is FE. Conventional moral evaluations may then give rise to tensions despite the fact that they're felt as something foreign to the self. So this is like, as the INTP develops, they develop more SF stuff and they give rise to tensions. In the case of characters with much polarity, there then arises the need to deal with manifestations of the counter nucleus in accordance with standards of the dominant function. Abstract thinking concerning conflicts and problems and feeling is a consequence stimulated. So you might get this with the 5-wing-4 INTP, where they then start thinking about their feelings and their emotions. And I would also argue with the INTJ with that tertiary FI.
Okay.
Like, so I think a 5-wing-4 INTJ might have a bit more FI going on, but also you could say something to the 6 as well. It's not quite clear cut. And then here, so when it's unhealthy, in cases where the conflicts in feeling are under the control of repressed complexes, so we could maybe say fixations, unhealthy fixations in Enneagram, an obsessional neurotic character may be developed. But where there is greater freedom in thought, we get a morality founded on principles and reason, capable of giving rise to fresh insight into the life of feeling. So this would be where the NT has integrated their SF.
Okay.
And so this is like this other idea of the B side of the personality, where the INTJ, and even Dario calls it its is his inner ESFP. If you develop that B side of your personality, your inner ESFP and my inner ESFJ, and that's where it doubles up. And you get TI and FE working in tandem, and NI and SE working in tandem. Like you're developing your SE in terms of like and eventually you might get to a point where you're able to tell me maybe how your developing SE has helped your NI. I know that's a tricky question because NI is such a hard thing to talk about. But there we go. So we can talk more about the various parts of Model V and my
As a quick I have to go soon, but I just have kind of a cheeky question that's kind of unrelated, but not really. Just due to the FE and the INTP, would you say that because you and another guy I used to know who was an INTP, who was younger, so maybe not as developed in the FE, but still it would peak out more so than any INTJ I knew. And another INTP, I'm pretty sure he's an INTP. There's just this subtle politeness about it. It's almost NFE. Would you say that the INTP is like the most NF of the NTs? Maybe. Because of that FE?
Now, this is where Kersey is brilliant. This is why I beseech people in typology. Yes, functions are good, but also learn about Kersey and learn about Enneagram. Learn the big three. Learn all three because they all help. So, for example, interaction styles. NTPs are the only informing, i.e. non-directive thinking types.
Yeah. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of the communication style, and definitely so. You're so, as opposed to myself, which I've had to learn over the years to kind of scale back, because when I almost tell people like when we're going to schedule it, what we're going to do, I'm like, hey, like chill out, because it comes off as rude, and I'm not trying to be rude. It's just the way I am. So thank you for helping me realize that also. But I find with a lot of INTPs that you're just so, and I think this can be really sweet. Like if I like them, that is. It's just you have this politeness about you that I think is sweet. But with some, especially with one of them, male, I find that it's almost personally. It's almost it's the same. Just dainty,
overly polite,
but not in a good way. At least
overly polite.
No, not so, just like finicky almost.
Right.
Sensitive, but not in a good way. Just very, scared to like so polite. You don't want to intrude, and I'm just like, I appreciate that you want to be polite, but hey, get in there. Like, tell me what you want.
Well, that's part of the. Weakest function, and if we can see it on this graphic here, SE, weakest. I mean, it's not really the right size, but the weak function SE in INTP and an accommodator. So that the assertive. I want to get the sub-functions out there. Get people to like say, Ben, you're right. Yeah, absolutely bang on about these sub-functions. Yes, you took the idea from Victor and reapplied it to functions. But that's really good. Yes, very good sub-functions. That's what I want. That's the feedback I want. Feed the suggestible FE. Tell me how good this sub-functions idea is. Right, that's what I want. Right. So the assertive sub-function of SE, like get out there, yearn for impact, audacious, all that sort of stuff. Like INTP not so good at that.
Okay.
Especially on the physical plane. Then the creative part of SE, and then the harmonizing part of it. The harmonizing part of SE is like adapting to your environment. And then the creative part of SE is a little bit tricky because I think other functions come into play. Like, so when SFPs are creative, I think that's involving their feeling functions as well. Like, say, an ESFP show player, ESFP actress or actor or singer. It's like they're involving their feeling, I believe, in the creativity. It's not just SE on its own. It's going to be with other functions. So, yes, but when I was younger, this FE wasn't there. I was like, well, aren't you small? I've got space here. I would say that. Oh yeah, but I've got a big space here. It's hard to smell. That's what I would say.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that I noticed this in maybe like, okay, so this guy that I knew, this was in like in my younger years in high school. So I don't know, like maybe getting into the 20s and 30s, you just develop more of this FE, like as far as INTPs. I mean, INTJs too, but like, yeah, I find that the INTPs just have such a dainty, polite way about them, but it can only, yes. Right.
Yeah, I'll give you. So there's one in each temperament. So I'm going to ask you for each. Which type do you think is the accommodator out of the 4 guardians?
So the guardian, this would be SJ.
Yeah. Which SJ is the accommodator?
I'd guess ISFJ or ESFJ.
Yes, ISFJ. Yeah.
Okay.
And ESFJ would be get things going, so more expressive.
Okay. And I only guess that because I think my mom is an ISFJ.
Yeah. It should spring to mind because Kirsty, like, you can see things at the whole level. And ISTJ is contending, and the initiator, the in charge, ESTJ.
Yeah.
So, and here's I'm just going to do this for completeness. Well, we already know the accommodator out of the NTs is
the INTP.
I should maybe point myself, but okay. So, idealists, which one of the NFs is the accommodator?
Ooh, ENFP.
Okay, I'll give you some extra information on an accommodator. An accommodator is informing and reserved.
Okay, so INFP.
INFP, yeah. So which one's the initiator? Which is the most in charge, the most assertive NF?
ENFP or ENFJ.
ENFJ, okay.
Yeah.
And which one is the contender?
Oof. Yeah, maybe it's a little difficult for me because the ENFP that I know, he has his moments. I don't know. I guess ENFJ.
Okay, so I'll say a bit more about these. So like the initiators are the in charge ones.
Okay.
They're like the way they're bossy, but like ENFJ does it like they've got like charm, so they're like not as bossy as the other ones.
Okay.
Then you got the contender, which is like chart the course, more directive, more like if they're not expressive, they're like you. They're like they planful, bit more planful. They contend, they'll assert something, but they're reserved. Get thing going is expressive, it's collaborative. Hey, do you want to do this? Want to do this? Want people to buy into? Hey, let's do this. Like, get jolly things along.
Okay.
All right, they're informing, and they are expressive. Hey, what about this? What about that? All that sort of stuff. And then accommodators, they're behind the scenes, they're reserved, and they're informing. Well, what about this? We don't have to. So now for the other temperaments. So out of the artisans, which is the big and nasty initiator?
Oof. ESFP.
ESFP.
SP. Okay.
If you go through all the SPs.
ESTP.
ESTP, yeah.
Okay.
Which one's the contender?
I mean, why wouldn't it be the ESTJ?
Well, no, because the ESTJ is not an artisan.
And we're going through what now?
We're doing the artisans. Right, so if we say, so the
ESTP?
collaborate, so ESTP is the initiator, the in charge.
Okay, but gosh, I don't know.
What
You'll have to help me with this one.
Okay, so we can do a sort of process of elimination. The collaborator is the one that's more wants to involve people, is more informing, collaborative. The contender is directive.
Okay, so I'm thinking STP with that one.
Yeah, it's ISTP, the contender.
Okay,
so it's like the initiator, but more reserved.
Okay, yeah, that helps
And-
with the IS.
And then, so which ones do you think ESFP and ISFP are?
Well, the E I think would definitely be more like get going.
Yep.
Get things going. So that's would
Yep.
be my guess.
Yep. And then ISFP is the accommodator.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what we got left? We done the Guardian. Have we done them all?
I think so.
We did. I think we've done them all. Yeah, there we go.
We did, and I'm like 10 minutes past.
Okay, there we go. Right, there we go.
So let's do a part 2 next time. We can elaborate on this. Pick up here if you want to. Would be great.
Yep. More on Model V. So hopefully people get where I'll give them my best shot at trying to explain introversion and extroversion as I understand it, and has Jung saw it, which is why I wanted to put all those quotes in there.
Okay. Well, sounds good to me. Thank you all for standing by, and hope you learned something. And I guess that's it. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye, folks.